Well, a very warm welcome to this, our 5th episode in a series of 6 called Faith in the Parish. This episode is hosted by myself. I'm Sharon Copestake and I'm the Archdeacon of Tunbridge in the Rochester Diocese, and my colleague.
And Dave Chesney, who is a vicar in the Newham Deanery in the Chelmsford Diocese, also Area Dean of Newham. And we are delighted to introduce our 3 contributors for this episode. Firstly, the Venerable Fiona Gibson. Fiona has been Archdeacon of Ludlow since April 2021 and as part of the senior staff of the Diocese of Hereford, the Church of England's most rural diocese. She is involved in day-to-day with parishes seeking to live out their vocation in context which paradoxically is both stable and rapidly changing. Fiona also chairs the Diocesan Board of Education and has found that some of the challenges faced by rural parishes, such as small numbers, remote locations, and financial constraints, are also faced by rural schools. Prior to her appointment as Archdeacon, Fiona was vicar of 3 rural parishes in the Diocese of St Albans, where she learned much about the joys, challenges, and reality of rural life and ministry. She is the member of General Synod House of Clergy and sits on the Transformation Steering Group, a national body which oversees work designed to further the development of women's ordained ministry in the Church of England. Alongside her ministry, Fiona is currently researching and writing a doctoral thesis on the subject of acedia, which means sloth, and its modern manifestations, and how Christians might resist it. Welcome, Fiona.
Thank you, Dave.
Secondly, I'd like to introduce the Reverend Dr. Christian Selvaratnam. Christian is the Dean of Church Planting at St Hild College in the north of England, where he is the founder of the Centre of Church Planting and Church Planting Track. Prior to this, he worked for 15 years at Alpha UK in various roles, including as National Director, and concurrently for 14 years as the ordained leader of G2, an innovative Anglican church plant in York. Before this, he was a Free Church minister and also a Church of England verger. Christian is a veteran church planter and currently a practical theologian involved in training leaders and advising on church planting strategy, leadership development, mission and vocations, particularly in the north of England. His doctoral studies were on apprenticeship methods of vocational training, and his findings have been published in a book, The Craft of Church Planting, with SCM Press, and in another, Why Church Planting, with Grove Books in the autumn. He is married to Amanda, lives in York, and owns a caravan. Welcome, Christian.
Thanks, Dave.
And finally, last but not least, Father Marcus Walker. Marcus is the Rector of Great St Bartholomew in the City of London. On August the 3rd last year, he invited people to join a movement called Save the Parish to support those, in brackets, key limiting factors, a building and a stipend and long, costly college-based training for every leader of church, which has brought thousands of people together from across the country to stand for General Synod, investigate national and diocesan finances, and support parochial ministry from the ground up. He stood for General Synod on a Save the Parish platform and along with over 150 others was elected. Before his current parish, he was Deputy Director of the Anglican Centre in Rome, having been a curate in North London. He writes for The Times, The New Statesman, The Spectator, The Telegraph, and The Critic magazine. Welcome, Marcus.
Hello and welcome.
Thank you. Over to you, Sharon.
Okay, well, look, this series of podcasts is designed to and is going to improve the quality of discussion and inform the conversation surrounding the parish and its future, with a particular focus towards General Synod members. So earlier this year, we asked General Synod members about the parish and their hopes and their fears for the future, which has helped steer us towards this episode, which we're calling Mixed Ecology, Resource Driven or Context Enabled. So drawing upon what over 200 General Synod members have said to us, we want to spend the next 20-25 minutes exploring the implications of a mixed ecology of church upon the current understanding of the parish. And by mixed ecology, we're talking about a church where new communities of faith developed within a particular context work alongside or complement the existing church structure. So I'm quite excited for us to explore some of these comments this afternoon that we've received from General Synod on this topic. But let's start by referring back to something that Archbishop Stephen said.
Thank you, Sharon. Not too much else from us. Mixed ecology is a key strategic priority in the Church of England's 10-year vision. Archbishop of York, Stephen Cotterill, has said this, and this quote is truncated. It is about parishes revitalised for mission. We will develop pathways around where people are, home, work, school, leisure. We want more church, not less. The ministry of the whole people of God. We need to look like the communities we serve. So this is the question to all of our contributors. Given your own experience and understanding of parish, how might you respond to this Archbishop's statement? And I'm going to go in alphabetical order, and I'm going to ask Fiona if you would like to respond.
Sure. Well, I guess I hope the Archbishop will forgive me, and he might even agree with what I'm about to say, but it just seems to me that that's fairly much a statement of the blindingly obvious, in that that's what we've been doing in rural communities forever and a day. I've never seen the two, parish and new pathways, as being opposed to one another. So when I was still in parish ministry, we started a worshipping congregation called Forest Church, and we just saw that as our fourth church, alongside the three established churches that were already going, and it very much was just part of what we were offering. And here the Archbishop mentioned schools in particular in his quote. Well, in our 78 church schools and academies that we have across the diocese, that's embedded in our diocesan strategy as a way in which we are reaching out to those around us, and those schools are embedded in their parish. That's where they are. So we don't just look like the communities that we serve in a rural context. We are the communities that we serve, because that's part of who we are. It's part of our unique vocation. So I guess I'd say mixed ecology really is our norm and has been forever. I suppose the thing that distinguishes us as a church from the many other rural community groups is that we exist primarily, well, solely exist to worship God and help people move along what our bishop calls a clear trail to Christ. So I suppose where people join that trail, whether it be coming to traditional forms of church or whether they come to one of our new initiatives or come to one of our church schools, where they join it and how they move along it, that for me is what mixed ecology is all about, and it's just what we do here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Very thoughtful and, as you say, very obvious to you. Christian, what would you say?
Yeah, I also agree with Fiona, and the way Sharon explained mixed ecology, she named it as something in addition to parish, which of course is true. But I agree with what Fiona's saying, that it is also a way of looking at how to do parish really well. Yesterday, I had lunch with a minister in North Yorkshire, and he told me he was an average parish priest, and he's got a typical parish. But when I asked him about what he was doing, he has 9 different expressions of ministry taking place, different services, missional communities, different gatherings, different outreaches. And his view was they formed a cohesive unit under his oversight as the minister, but actually they connected with the necessary sort of diversity that was needed if they were going to reach the different groups of people in the parish. I think I think there are lots of reasons, and I might pick up some of these later when I get to say something, but I think there are multiple reasons why different expressions are good at revitalizing the whole of the church. And that includes reasons like trying new ideas and experimentation. I think new expressions are often better at reaching new groups or unreached groups. Very few parishes are reaching everyone in their parish. They're probably reaching a subset. They're probably reaching 1 or 2 cultural group. So what about these other groups? Who's going to reach them? So for me, the mixed ecology is permission to experiment, to reach those. And in doing that, what we can do is explore ideas that will actually bring refreshment back to the parish system.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you so much. And Marcus, what have you got to say, Marcus?
Well, I mean, the first thing I would say is I'm a little hesitant about this phrase mixed ecology. It's something that's never been passed by a general synod at any point. The vision and strategy has never been passed by anybody in the Church of England at any point. Mixed ecology, I've found, tends to mean slightly different things depending on the discussion that's being had and how optimistic you're feeling, and whether you're talking about money and resources or whether you're talking about... So I'm a little bit hesitant about plunging straight in and saying, I welcome, love, and adore this concept of mixed ecology, or I reject, abhor, and despise this concept of mixed ecology, or anything in between, because it all depends what we mean by mixed ecology. What I will say about the Archbishop's comments, which you quoted, is show me the money. It's all very well saying you want more church, you want more parish, you want more people coming to church, but show me the money and show how it works, because all of this right now, the reason why there's so much of a question about parochial ministry and about how to draw people to Christ and about how best we can draw as many people as possible to Christ hinges around how we use the resources we have and how we use them wisely and how we follow the evidence that we've got from the reports and the studies that have been made in order to know how best to do this. And every single study the Church of England has conducted, and the most recent was in 2016, says that that there is no guide to church growth from churchmanship, from style of worship, from type of hymns enjoined, and the one absolute common thread is the fewer parishes and parish churches being run by a priest, the more that churches grow. The more parishes and churches that a priest has to deal with, the more that parishes don't grow. And our money and our resources and our time and effort have to be focused around that, and actually pumping money and resources into parishes and into priests and into making sure that they're as strong and as vital and as sustainable as possible. And that most especially means supporting places that are poor and can't look after themselves and actually need support from the national church structures and from other parts of the church to do it. So show me the money is my short answer.
So quoting Jerry Maguire, and thank you, Marcus, for that. Sharon.
We've been to General Synod and asked them a series of questions, one of which we asked them is what they've considered to be the biggest issue facing the parish. We were quite general about this over the next 5 years. And I'm going to read a particular response that we've had, which is echoed by quite a few of our responses, but they put it like this. The challenge varies according to context. In rural areas, financial sustainability is a pressing issue. In some city, urban and suburban areas, the sense of a parish as a geographical unit has been lost, which means that parish churches have become increasingly gathered and inward looking, and limit their focus to the first two of the 5 marks of mission. And that's the first two are to proclaim the good news of the kingdom and to teach, baptize and nurture new believers, or tell and teach, if you want to summarize that. Fiona, in rural Ludlow, I just wondered how you would reflect upon that comment, whether that resonates with you in your context.
Perhaps surprisingly, I might want to say, whilst finances are always a challenge, I think that's true of 90% of parishes across the whole land, whether that be rural, estate, urban or suburban. Actually, some of the other challenges I think we face are around things like population size. So, for example, in the Diocese of Hereford, we have over 400 churches, parish churches, for a population equivalent to the town of Reading. That means we have about one building on average for every 800 people. That's not people attending church, that's people. So that brings a fair amount of challenge, and we've got all those beautiful buildings which we love. Many of them are listed, well, 90% of them are listed, and many of those are at grade 1. So just think for a moment about that challenge. If you are, as in one parish I'm going to be visiting in a couple of weeks' time, looking after a grade 2 star listed building in a hamlet of 36 souls, that's not 36 worshipping community people, that's 36 people. That's quite a challenge. So it's things like isolation of communities, ability to get from one place to another, the very embeddedness that is the heart of what we do, where we are instinctively still the place that people will turn to in a crisis. That actually presents a challenge to our dedicated clergy, because their combined population across a multi-parish benefice might only be 1,500 people. We really want to continue being places of gospel welcome for the whole community, but we also have to be realistic about the capacity of our people, clergy and laity. So actually our challenges are less about finance and more about isolation, rural poverty, lack of infrastructure, and a huge missing gap of generations of people aged 20 to 55 who have to leave the area to go and find work. Those, I think, are some of the bigger challenges that we face.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful, Fiona. I wonder if I could press in on that, just lift a phrase from that quote there, with a sense that around the parish as a geographical unit being lost. That was a theme that came up in our responses more generally. I wonder if Marcus or Christian, either of you have got something you would comment upon in agreement or not with that idea.
I think partly it's an observation that our society is more complex, and in an age before cars and things like that, of course geography was everything, because everyone lived within walking distance of everywhere, and that's the origins of our ancient parish system, which is excellent. But now we live in a world, whether you like it or not, that people can jump in a car and drive 10 minutes to church, or 20 minutes to church, or 30 minutes, whatever it might be. Some people are more at an age and a stage where they're more connected with their circle of friends at work or through their social group. So we can either lament and whinge about, the nasty people that don't go to church and why they're doing it wrong, or we could be savvy and say, as well as being geographic, which makes a lot of sense for many people in many contexts and at particular ages and stages, that we add to that an understanding that we also network with people where they live, where they socialize, where they study, etc., and that we embrace a blended approach. And I think any season when the church has grown significantly in history has always done that. So the lesson of history is we'd be foolish to ignore that or to fight that the innovation that comes from that eventually settles into more solid sort of frameworks. But you don't fight it while it's flowing. Go with it while it's happening, see what happens, and then in time it sort of finds a pattern that you can say, oh, I understand the structure now.
Thank you, that's really helpful. I think you've kind of moved us neatly towards the next question. So I wonder, actually, Dave, do you want to just pick that up and pose that?
Sure, and this question is for Marcus. Another comment that we had from General Synod facing the parish was this: to learn to be a confident, humble and gentle presence on fewer resources but without fear of change, less reliance on a need for paid clergy and more on local people developing habits of prayer and responding to the needs and possibilities of their context. Marcus, could you reflect on this comment in light of your experience of parish ministry and, of course, your involvement in the Save the Parish movement?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm not really in agreement with this comment at all, in fact, except as a premise that we've got these scarce resources and we've got to shrink down the amount of, as it says, I think just looking at the quotation, what was it that we that's less reliance on need for paid clergy, more on local people developing habits of prayer and responding to the needs and possibilities in their context. This very much seems to come out of the what was it called? What's the most Setting God's People Free document that came out of the last synod, which began by saying there have been, I think, 50 reports since the war encouraging the people of God to take more of an active part in their church in very specific ways, and people of God singularly failed to live up to this. There's a certain element in a lot of this of turning around and going, right, the future is fewer clergy, less money. Now people of God get up and act as, be surrogate clergy. Your job now is to fill the hole that we're not filling. Actually, we're currently ordaining more people than we're losing, both through retirement and through people dropping out of ministry midway through. We currently do not have a recruitment crisis in the Church of England. There have actually been some very, very good initiatives over the last 10 years of trying to encourage more vocations, and those vocations have been encouraged. The shrinking in the number of positions for clergy has, of course, happened at the same time, which is why we've got a whole load of stories popping up on social media, and indeed in real life, if you know the people as I do, a good number of people who find themselves reaching the end of curacy and there being no place for them at the other side of it. The decision not to fund incumbency positions and to shrink the number of incumbency positions is a decision. It's not something that's happening to us, that's forced on us. It is a choice of redeploying resources away from stipendiary ministry and towards a whole host of other things, the biggest of which is the Strategic Development Fund, where, what was it, £176 million earmarked, 89,000 new witness disciples projected, 12,600 actually realised. An astronomical amount of money when, for example, Leicester is reducing the number of stipendiary ministry by 20% for a £1.3 million deficit. We've got the money not to be doing this. We're choosing not to do it. And we're being presented with a false choice that we will necessarily have fewer priests, necessarily have fewer stipendiary posts, when we have a £10 billion Church Commissioners pile of assets and a £9 billion endowments and glebes pot of assets run by Diocese, and we're choosing how to direct those in ways that aren't supporting parochial ministry.
Marcus, thank you for that powerful, very powerful statement about choice as far as where the Church of England spends their money. Could I ask whether Christian or Fiona would like to respond to that? Fiona, and then Christian.
Yeah, so I've got a different question from Marcus's question about the phrase reliance on paid clergy, as though to coin a phrase, there's this expectation that in some senses the vicar is the church and that the laity are there to help the vicar be the church, whereas in fact, in my understanding of those called to ordain ministry being there to prepare the saints for acts of service, in fact it's that the vicar helps the people to be the church. So I think that phrase reliance on paid clergy, my question there is actually, yes, that is correct. I don't think we should be reliant on paid clergy to be the church, but that all of us together, clergy and laity, are called to be the church and to carry out the mission of the church wherever we find ourselves. Ordained people are indeed trained, prepared, gifted, called and set apart for very specific roles of leading worship and indeed preparing the saints for acts of service.
Thank you, Fiona. Christian, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, I think we've undervalued clergy, but I think we've over-clericalized our understanding of ministry. And I think we could learn a trick or two from Anglican provinces abroad, particularly those in poorer areas where the structural involvement of lay people in the ministry of the church is far more normative. A catechist in Africa is probably leading a congregation. An evangelist in India is probably planting churches. Pastoral coordinators, mission enablers, these are very often lay roles that work within a team that's overseen by a priest. And that's their pattern of ministry. And of course, it's driven by money. You know, they have less resources, but hey, what, we're discovering we've got less resources. So maybe we have over clericalized and assumed everything should be done by a priest. And that was my experience in planting a church. We were given 200 quid and that was it. So I had to figure out how to do it as a newly ordained priest with 200 pounds. So what did I do? I empowered the laity to work with me. And guess what? You discover they have amazing gifts. I haven't been undermined in my role. We were able to work together and do exactly as Fiona described, a very comprehensive ministry to the people that we served.
Marcus, I see you want a right of response on that, and it sounds like what Christian was explaining was the idea of scarce resources leading to maybe a different pattern of ministry that one is forced into. Marcus, what would you like to say? And please be as brief as possible.
I will try and be as brief as possible, but I think actually what we've got to here is the nub of one of the questions, which is one of ecclesiology. Because actually, I would, being a good Protestant man myself, I'd go back to the 39 Articles and would say that the visible Church of Christ is a congregation of faithful men, and I'd add women, quite importantly, in which the pure word of God is preached and sacraments be duly ministered according to Christ's ordinance. Without priests, we cannot have the sacraments ministered, and without people trained, we really can't have the word of God preached. And we actually need to face up to the fact that if the visible Church of Christ is where the pure word of God is preached and the sacraments are ministered, we do need priests, and there is a limit to the degree to which the laity can fulfill that role.
Thank you, Marcus. Sharon.
Yeah, thank you. Marcus, actually, you've led us neatly into our third question, because some of our comments showed that we received from General Synod had a distinct anxiety expressed around resource churches at the expense of smaller churches, and I'm really generalising there because it was nuanced within the responses. But one comment that we pulled out described the next 5 years. We said, what is the main issue? They said, articulating the gift of smaller churches to the wider church, rather than being subsumed or neglected by the centre or resource churches, really touching on some of those things that we've just highlighted, which is often around perception, but also some lived experience, no doubt, in that. So I wonder, Christian, this perhaps is more your bag to respond initially to that comment. What would you say to it?
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. As you said, central to the Church of England's vision strategy for the 2020s is to revitalise the parish system for mission. And I would say history and recent developments tell us that parish is revitalised often through new initiatives and through things which in very modern language will be called a resource church. So let me just make a little apologetic for the resource church first, because I think that gets us to then why small churches are important, but how we actually help the smaller churches. Firstly, it's nothing new. From the earliest of days, the Christian church, there've always been some churches that have been key to resourcing the apostolic spread of the gospel that's beyond their local sphere of influence. Catholics very happily use terms like sodal and modal to unpack the sophistication of that. And in the New Testament, we've got places such as Jerusalem and Antioch. In English history, we have examples of that as well. The 6th century Augustine of Canterbury, he rebuilt St. Martin's Church and used it as a hub, a resource church, to start new mission outlets, to plant new churches. The Celtic missioners did the same from Iona, from Lindisfarne. They built centres that were hubs, that were resourceful enough to allow the mission to spread effectively to other places. And even within the parish system, we acknowledge types of resource church. For example, we have words like minster churches or cathedral. These are all types of churches with a particular wider influence, not for their own benefit, but to benefit the wider network of churches. So In the modern period, this term resource church has been used. There are about 110 of them. Some have been given, a few have been given a lot of money. Most have only been given some money, and they've been given very high expectations of what they need to give in return to that. And some have been given no money. So I just, I need to speak up for their behalf. Some have been given nothing and asked to do a lot. So it is a myth to suggest that all of these have been given, millions and billions, and they're just doing it to be, to have a plush sort of lavish life. They're usually given this for a fixed period of time. It's a decreasing resource, and there are high expectations of what they need to deliver from it. I think the elephant in the room is that most churches are not growing. The last stats before COVID told us that only 10% of parishes had grown over a 5-year period. Now, argue what you like from that. That's the reality of our trajectory that we need to invest into. And I think churches that are effective in mission, that can spread and assist that to others, are key to turning that around, particularly in something as complex as the Church of England. I don't think anyone is against small churches. And in fact, I think the English context gravitates towards a church of a size where it's led by a priest. I think, we're like America, where we should be aspiring for churches of thousands and thousands. There might be one or two like that. There might be a few that are in the many hundreds. But most churches in England, I think our culture tells us, will be around the size of 100 or so, and they will have a clergy leader or a lay equivalent person leading that into growth. But what we've forgotten is how to grow. And we can lament a bit and say, well, it's because there's too much paperwork or because there's too many meetings. But in my experience, mission finds a way. If the minister of a church has a heart for mission, they will find a way to be missional. And a bit like the parable of the talents, those that we should invest more in order to multiply that and spread that around. And I mentioned history before. Go to Victorian history. They absolutely had a mixed ecology revolution. They planted churches in schools. They built most of our church schools, daughter churches, Tim tabernacles, debating clubs, social projects, churches in pubs, churches in police stations, churches on buses, you name it. The Victorians innovated it. And what came out of all this innovation was it strengthened the parish system. It reminded the parish of what its primary calling of mission was, and maybe that it was possible to reach people. And over time, it does become embedded in the parish. So tomorrow I'm going to see a minister. I used to lead a church that met in a gym. Tomorrow I'm going to see a minister in Middlesbrough who his church he leads is a parish church. It's the biggest in Middlesbrough, and it's a church that began in a gym. So there's nothing new. Maybe the church I led in a gym will just become a parish in 50 years or so. So denominations move in seasons. What we must acknowledge is the Church of England is declining, and we must produce realistic solutions consistent to our history and the way we are ordered that have a realistic chance of achieving growth. And I think the ultimate goal of resource churches, and you're starting to see that now, is that they're not building empires. None of them want to do that. What they're actually doing is resourcing the further mission that spreads. And that's how you go from a central bigger church into some of the local context, the estates, the unreached community, and some of the other groups that maybe parishes aren't currently reaching.
Thank you so much. So Christian's declaring the elephant in the room as being that around decline. All told, and maybe some of our anxieties perhaps are really about that. I think that's probably what you're driving at there, than some of the other things. We asked, I think actually, Dave, let's move on to our one-liner that we'd like from each person.
Okay, yes, we did ask about, certainly when we asked General Synod about the challenges for the next 5 years, we got quite a lot of responses. And so if I could ask each one of you in one sentence, and I know it's difficult, what do you see as the biggest issue for the parish over the next 5 years? What would that be? And I'm going to go in reverse reverse alphabetical order. I'm going to ask Marcus if you could respond to that.
The biggest challenge I would suggest of the next 5 years is how to respond to the evidence of what does and doesn't work to help parishes grow and thrive and survive. And that is to ensure that we resource the number of priests so that we can have as few churches and parishes being given to priests as possible, the highest ratio of parishioner to, like the lowest ratio of parishioner to priest as possible, and to ensure that our funding reflects the evidence that that is how churches grow.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you very much. Christian, I've given you a breather.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's quite a few answers, but let me pick one. I think it's that huge shift from a pastoral Christendom model, which is an excellent model, there's no fault with it, but to the model that's principally focused and aligned around mission, and to work that through the whole of the system so that the parish doesn't feel like having to fight everything else in order to be true to the mission that it wants to do. And I think the more we can do that, and we can create local parishes, which might be small, which are doing their bit for mission in their area, then actually the Church of England will return to growth.
Thank you, Christian. And finally, Fiona.
I don't think that the challenge is the things that we often say it is around buildings, finances, or even infrastructure, though those are challenges. I think the challenge is going to be the same as it's always been for the Church in every generation that she has existed since Christ was here and before he will return. It's the same it's always been, to live out our vocation, to proclaim the good news in word, sacrament and deed to the next generation, and to find ways that will do that are both pastoral and missional, because I don't see them in opposition.
Thank you, Fiona. Very simply put, thank you.
Thank you. How do we sum up where we've been? I don't know. We've touched on the importance of shared language. We've shared an understanding of what the issues may be, explored some of those around resourcing and the impact of the choices that are being made. And I think we've recognised too the complexities, not least historically, as well as what our current context is providing. So we've only skimmed the surface, but I do think it's a step better forward towards a more informed conversation. So thank you so much, Fiona Gibson, Marcus Walker and Christian Selvaratnam for coming and sharing your thoughts. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.